Roberto Mendonça was a man of strict routine. A successful businessman in Sao Paulo, he usually arrived home well after 9 p.m., when his wife and young son were already asleep. But that night, the meeting with investors ended earlier than expected. Without telling anyone, Roberto decided to return home. The moment he pushed open the grand wooden doors of his mansion in Jardins, he froze. He couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. There, in the middle of the living room, Beatriz, the 28-year-old housemaid, was on her knees, scrubbing the marble floor with a wet cloth. But that wasn't what made Roberto's heart stop. Next to her stood his 4-year-old son, Pedro, balancing on his tiny purple crutches. The boy clutched a dish towel in his small hands, struggling to wipe the floor as if he were part of the cleaning crew. "Aunt Bea, I can clean this part here," Pedro said proudly, his little arm stretching with effort. "Calm down, Padrinho. You've already helped me enough today. How about you sit on the couch while I finish up?" Beatriz replied gently, her voice filled with warmth Roberto had never heard before. "But I want to help." "You always say we're a team," Pedro insisted, wobbling slightly on his crutches. Roberto stood at the door, unnoticed, his chest tightening. There was something about that scene, his son smiling, engaged, alive, that struck him deeply. It had been so long since he'd seen Pedro this happy. "All right, my little helper," Beatriz gave in, "just a little more, okay?" At that moment, Pedro spotted his father in the doorway. His blue eyes lit up, but a mix of surprise and nervousness flickered across his face. "Daddy! You came home early," the boy exclaimed, nearly losing his balance in excitement. Beatriz quickly stood up, startled. She dropped the cloth, wiped her damp hands on her apron, and lowered her gaze. "Good evening, Mr. Roberto. I didn't know you were home. Forgive me, I was just finishing up the cleaning," she stammered. Roberto stepped into the living room, his voice firm. "Pedro, sit down." The boy obeyed, clutching his towel, while Beatriz lowered her gaze. "What exactly are you doing with my son?" Roberto demanded. Beatriz hesitated. "Mr. Roberto, I only wanted to help. The doctors gave exercises, but Pedro was alone. I thought, maybe I could encourage him." Roberto's eyes hardened. "You're a maid, not a therapist." Before Beatriz could respond, Pedro shouted, "Daddy! Don't speak to her like that. Aunt Bea is the only one who believes I can walk without help." His words pierced the silence. For the first time, Roberto saw courage in his son's fragile voice. Beatriz whispered, "If I overstepped, punish me." But I only wanted him to smile again. Roberto turned away, conflicted. He had expected defiance, not sincerity. And in that moment, he realized this woman had changed his son's world, perhaps even his own. That night, Beatriz sat by the small window in her room, staring at the city lights. Her heart raced with fear and confusion. She hadn't meant to anger Roberto, yet Pedro's words replayed in her mind. "She believes I can walk." Meanwhile, in his study, Roberto poured himself a drink. His son's outburst had unsettled him. He had never seen Pedro so determined. And it was Beatriz, just a maid, who had awakened that strength. The door creaked open. It was Pedro. "Daddy, don't punish Aunt Bea. Please. She helps me because she cares." Roberto looked at his son and sighed. "Go to bed, Pedro. We'll talk tomorrow." When the boy left, Roberto leaned back, torn between pride and fear. Beatriz was no ordinary servant, she was becoming part of their lives in a way he hadn't expected, and deep down, he knew, the more she stayed, the more dangerous the truth would become. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with quiet tension. At breakfast, Pedro smiled at Beatriz, but his mother, Helena, noticed. Her sharp eyes narrowed. "Why is my son looking at the maid like that?" she asked coldly. Roberto shifted uncomfortably. "Helena, let it go. He's just a child." But Helena wasn't convinced. Later, she cornered Beatriz in the hallway. "I don't know what game you're playing, but remember your place. You serve this family, you don't belong to it." Beatriz lowered her head. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, though her hands trembled. That evening, Pedro refused to eat unless Beatriz sat near him. Helena's fury boiled, while Roberto watched silently, torn. Between his wife's pride and his son's fragile happiness, for Beatrice, the mansion was no longer just a workplace, it was a battlefield, and in that silent war, the boy's trust was her only shield. Days passed, and Beatrice quietly continued helping Pedro. Late one afternoon, when the house was still, she whispered, "Come on, Pedro, just try. One step." Pedro's hands shook as he gripped the chair. His legs trembled, but Beatrice held him steady. "I'll catch you if you fall." With all his strength, Pedro pushed forward. His foot moved, just an inch, but it was movement. His eyes widened. I did it." Beatrice smiled through tears. "Yes, you did. You're stronger than you know." Unseen from the doorway, Roberto watched, stunned. His son had taken a step, not because of doctors, not because of him, but because of the maid he once dismissed. Pedro hugged Beatrice tightly. "Promise me you'll never leave me, Aunt Bea." Her voice broke as she whispered, "I promise." And Roberto realized he was witnessing the start of something that could never be undone. Helena soon noticed the change in her son. Pedro's laughter echoed through the mansion, his courage growing with every secret step he practiced with Beatrice. But instead of joy, Helena felt threatened. One evening, she confronted Roberto. "Our son is depending on the maid more than his own parents. Do you not see how dangerous this is?" Roberto exhaled, tired of the constant battles. "Helena, for the first time in months, Pedro is smiling. Isn't that what matters?" Her voice sharpened. "What matters is control. And if we lose that, we lose everything." Meanwhile, Beatrice sat in her small room, whispering prayers. She knew Helena's hatred was growing, and it frightened her. But when Pedro knocked on her door, holding a crayon drawing of the two of them, her heart softened. "Don't be sad, Aunt Bea," he said. "You're my hero." Tears welled in her eyes. For Pedro, she would endure anything, even Helena's wrath. Late at night, Helena paced her room, her mind burning with suspicion. "Why does Pedro cling to that woman?" she muttered. Determined, she ordered a servant, find out everything about Beatrice. Where she came from. Who she really is. The next day, whispers spread through the staff. Beatrice felt their stares but stayed silent, focusing only on Pedro's exercises. Roberto noticed her unease. "Is something wrong?" he asked softly. Beatrice hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing, sir." But her trembling hands betrayed her fear. That evening, Helena received a sealed envelope. Inside were documents, old hospital records, faded photographs. She froze, her lips curved into a cold smile. So, this is who she really is. Downstairs, Beatrice comforted Pedro, unaware that her past had just been uncovered, and soon, the secret she had buried for years would turn the mansion upside down. At dinner, Helena's eyes burned with triumph. She slammed the envelope onto the table. "Care to explain this, Beatrice?" Beatrice froze, her face pale. Roberto looked confused. "What is this?" Helena's voice was sharp. "She's not just some maid. Years ago, she was admitted to a hospital, pregnant. And the child she lost was yours, Roberto." The room fell silent. Beatrice's hands shook, tears brimming in her eyes. "Please, don't." Roberto's face turned white. Memories rushed back, nights of mistakes, promises broken. He stared at Beatrice, guilt piercing him. Pedro looked between them, frightened. "Daddy." "Aunt Bea." Beatrice whispered, "I never wanted this secret to come out. All I wanted was to care for Pedro." Helena smirked. "And now everyone knows exactly why." The fragile peace in the mansion shattered that night, leaving only shock and betrayal. The mansion was heavy with silence after Helena's revelation. Pedro clung to Beatrice's hand, refusing to let go. "She's not bad. She's my friend," he cried. Helena's voice sliced through the room. "She is a liar, Pedro. Everything she did was to hide her shame." Roberto stood frozen, torn between his wife and the woman he had once betrayed. Finally, he whispered, "Helena, enough. This isn't just about the past. Beatrice saved our son's spirit when we couldn't." Helena's face twisted in rage. "You dare defend her?" Beatrice's tears fell, but she stood tall. I never asked for your forgiveness. I only stayed because of Pedro. She turned toward Roberto. And despite everything, I gave him what you never could, hope. Pedro hugged her tightly, sobbing. Don't leave me, Aunt Bea. But Helena's glare promised only one thing: Beatrice's days in the mansion were numbered. The next morning, Helena's decision was final. She stood in the grand hall, her voice cold. Beatrice, you are no longer welcome here. Leave, today. Pedro screamed, clutching Beatrice's arm. No. Don't take her away. His small body shook as tears streamed down his face. Beatrice knelt before him, forcing a brave smile. Pedro, remember what I told you, you are stronger than you think. Keep walking, keep fighting. Roberto's voice trembled. Helena, please, after everything she's done, but Helena cut him off. If she stays, this family is destroyed. Beatrice kissed Pedro's forehead. I love you, mi pequeño. Then, with trembling steps, she walked out of the mansion. Leaving silence behind, that evening, Pedro tried to take a step alone. He stumbled, but he whispered through tears, for you, Aunt Bea. And though she was gone, her strength remained in his heart forever.